Week 29, Overview, the Roman Republic, Everyday Life. Rome grew from a cluster of farming villages to an empire that included most of the known world. But before it was an empire, it was a republic, for a long time. The Roman Republic lasted from about 510 BC to 27 BC, nearly 500 years, almost twice as long as the United States has lasted as a nation. We're studying the first half of that period this week. During this time, Rome grew from one small city to a major military power that conquered and controlled all of Italy. Rome started out as just one city among many in Italy. A few years after the Romans drove out their last king, Tarquin the Proud, they joined a league of cities called the Latin League. Within a century, Rome was the largest of these cities and used the power of the league to start conquering other cities. The Romans gave the people they conquered some of the rights of Romans and became stronger as a result, since their armies then swelled with new recruits from these territories. During the next century, Rome gradually devoured the Etruscans and the Latin League. They defeated the Gauls, who had invaded Italy from the north, and conquered the Samnites to the south. There wasn't much left to conquer on the Italian peninsula except for Tarentum, a Greek colony at the southern end of the Italian boot. Tarentum got help from Pyrrhus, a second cousin of Alexander the Great, who had spent years fighting in southern Italy and Sicily. Pyrrhus used war elephants, which helped him defeat the Romans at first, but he was finally forced out of Italy in 274 BC. With Tarentum defeated and Pyrrhus gone, Rome was master of all Italy. As we've said, Rome excelled at ruling the people they conquered. In general, government was something they were good at. Back when Rome had a king, and before it became a republic, there was a senate which advised the king. The Senate was made up of the heads of the leading families. The other citizens met in assemblies to vote on the decisions that the king and the Senate made. When Tarquin the Proud was driven out of Rome, the new republic kept the Senate and the assemblies in place. Instead of choosing a new king for life, however, these assemblies picked two consuls to head their government. These two men shared power, and each consul served for just 1 year. Either consul could veto any action by the other. This system of checks and balances wasn't very efficient, so in times of emergency they gave all power to a single man called a dictator for a limited time. At first, only a handful of men ran the republic. These were the patricians, the powerful, land-owning upper class. All the other citizens were called plebeians. As the centuries passed, the plebeians formed their own assembly and elected leaders called tribunes, who grew in power until they finally became the most important civil officers in the state. One thing that made Rome strong at first was its values. We talk about family values today. The Romans valued families very highly. Roman fathers had awe-inspiring powers. The head of a Roman household was the paterfamilias, father of a family. His entire household was his exclusive possession. He could do whatever he wanted with his family members. He could sell his children into slavery or have them killed. No son inherited property or even moved out of the home until he died. He arranged all marriages for his sons as well as his daughters. The Romans had a distinctive way of naming people, which goes back to the Etruscans. Other cultures in that time period tended to use a simple system of names. In Israel, for example, we see nicknames like Simon Peter, Simon the Rock, or son-of names like Simon Bar Jonah, Simon son of Jonah, or names that associate a person with a place like Jesus of Nazareth, or names that include a title like Jesus the Christ. Rome's naming system used 3 names for each man, sometimes 4. There was a first name, the praenomen, which was rarely used on its own and then only by intimate acquaintances. There are only a few dozen of these first names in common use among men, and 9 of them were just numbers: primus, secundus, tertius, quartus, quintus, sextus, septus, octavius, nonus, decimus, and so on. Other common praenomen include Marcus, Appius, Publius, and so forth. The second name was the gentilicum, which referred to a whole family group. Our closest equivalent would be our last name. If your last name is Smith and you Latinize it, your oldest son might be known as Primus Smithus. The third name was the cognomen. This was not something Romans got to pick out for themselves or for their children. The cognomen was either inherited from father to son or imposed by common consent, like a nickname. Many, if not most, of these were fairly insulting. There were Roman cognomens such as bearded, stutterer, dummy, and so forth. Emperor Nero's cognomen was Ahenobarbus, Redbeard. It's fun to come up with Roman names for your own family members. I'm Scott Somerville, second son of my father James, so my Roman name might be something along the lines of Secundus Somervillus Jacobus. If your children enjoy working out puzzles, perhaps they can figure out good Roman names for everybody in your family. I've explained that a Roman paterfamilias could lawfully execute his own children. This is just one surprising aspect of Roman law. Rome is one of the three main sources of law on the planet Earth. The other two are the Bible and the Quran. These have influenced legal systems around the world. Roman law serves as the foundation for every European country but Great Britain. Europe exported Roman law to its colonies, so the legal system of the state of Louisiana today still sits on a Roman foundation because Louisiana was originally a French colony. So even though it's subject to federal law, which is largely based on the British common law system, the state laws in Louisiana are ultimately Roman. Rome established its first legal code, the 12 Tables of the Law, around 450 BC. All the major laws that have been established by custom in Rome were engraved on 12 bronze tablets and set up in the Forum. Roman boys had to memorize these tables as part of their schoolwork. They defined the civil rights of a Roman citizen. They were very important. Only citizens could own property, enter into contracts, make a will, or go to court to sue for damages. As Rome expanded, it governed more and more people who weren't citizens. The Romans therefore developed a secondary body of law for these people, called the Law of Nations. The civil rights were privileges that only Romans enjoyed, but the Law of Nations provided a basic level of justice for any free man. As Rome grew powerful, it used the lure of Roman citizenship to overcome its opponents. Worthy adversaries were offered a limited form of Roman citizenship if they would surrender. Just join the Republic and you can be a citizen. Those who refused to surrender were enslaved. Slaves in Rome were not protected by the civil law or the Law of Nations. Slaves could be set free, however, and when a Roman citizen freed a slave, that slave immediately became a citizen too, just like his master. Let's turn from law to religion. Rome imported most of her major idols from other cultures, but many of the underlying religious ceremonies date back to the Etruscans. Roman religion began with a household hearth. The wife was responsible for keeping the home fires burning. There, at the hearth, the head of the household would make sacrifices to the household gods and the spirits of deceased ancestors. They kept small figurines of the various household deities in special cupboards. Some of these were taken out, put on the table at mealtimes. Now, the Roman state was like a larger household. The sacred hearth fire of the state was guarded not by one wife, but by 6 Vestal virgins. Where the family worshipped its ancestors along with the other gods, Rome, in its later years, deified its deceased emperors. The paterfamilias was the priest of household worship, and the state had its own religious head, the Pontifex Maximus, the great bridge between the people and the gods. We would think of the Romans as very superstitious. The Etruscans, before them, had practiced divination, seeking omens around them in nature. They would sacrifice an animal and examine its liver, which they considered the center of the living being, looking for signs. They believed in ghosts and in the significance of dreams, as we see in Matthew 27. Pilate's wife sent word to him saying, "Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I have suffered much because of him today in a dream." As we know, though, Pilate didn't listen to his wife that day. Well, that's a quick overview of life in the early Roman Republic. Some of these laws and customs may seem very strange. Others are quite familiar. Let's have fun this week, discovering just how much of Western civilization is built on this foundation of ancient Rome.